I always say that customer success is the business of human management. At the end of the day, as CSMs, as CS leaders, we're building relationships with other people. And so, one of the things I love about this topic and why it's so important that it's part of a customer success focused podcast is that you can't get away from culture in your personal or your professional life because it deals with people and culture is deeply ingrained in each of us. And I think for those of us who have moved around and experienced being the minority, we have a different, maybe a deeper appreciation and feeling about what that's like. I never appreciated until I moved abroad how important small talk is, but how very specific to a region or a culture that can be.
Welcome to another episode of Customer Success Talks Real Challenges Experts Advice, the podcast dedicated to helping those transitioning into customer success and early career customer success managers. I'm your host, Byron Toruño, passionate about customer success, a customer success nerd. And one day I was just really curious into what is customer success. And that's why I decided, together with my friend and ex co-host Nav Thomas, to create a podcast and start also learning and also bringing all of these conversations to everyone who is in the same position, right? Who is transitioning or is early career customer success manager. So it's a lot of tangible solutions, challenges, everything from public speaking, from negotiation skills, from persuasion skills. It's not only about sharing and customer relationship building, it's that and more. And talking about that and more, today's episode is super interesting. Today we will be talking with Laura Keitlinger. I hope I pronounced that well.
You got it. You got it. Thank you so much, Byron.
Everyone knows that I'm really bad at pronouncing last names and names. I hope everyone knows that by now. But yeah, today we will be talking with Laura. And before I continue introducing Laura, I want to let everyone know that today is going to be a really interesting conversation talking about cultural awareness. Why would that even be something that we need to take care of? The thing is that we are now in a digitalized age. We are now in the place where we can talk and meet everyone from different parts of the world. And that also means customers, but that also means your colleagues. And today we will be talking about cultural awareness from our perspective, from our experience. And for that, who else than Laura? Laura, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation.
I'm really happy as well about this conversation. And this is something that, we are all passionate about customer success and customer relationships, but there are topics outside of customer success that passionates me. And one of is cultural awareness. And this is something that happened to me personally when I moved from Costa Rica to Germany. And as a kid, I used to live in the States, and I know what it means to move around. But I also read a book called The Cultural Map that I would recommend everyone to read, and it was super interesting. So today I'm really open and willing to hear your experience. So Laura, why don't you tell everyone who is Laura? What's your background, and what brought you to just explore the world the way you have done it?
Sure, absolutely. So I'll share a little bit about my journeys around the world and then a bit more about my passions. So, as you may be able to tell from my accent, I originally hail from America. I actually grew up in the middle of the country in a city called Indianapolis and moved to Minneapolis after university, which is way up north, also in the middle of the country, before I headed out to California to follow a long-time dream of entering a more entrepreneurial career and also enjoying the great outdoors and living out west in America. While I was at university, I had studied abroad in Spain, and that was my first meaningful time outside of the US. And I fell in love with that part of the world and also with learning other cultural norms, learning a new language, and just being exposed to seeing how people overall are more the same than we are different around the world, and that there's kind of no right or wrong. Things were different in Spain, but they worked and they were fun and it was interesting to learn. And so I came back from that experience, actually told my parents, I'm going to move to Spain someday and I really want to live abroad. So working in tech in San Francisco, thinking about what's next for me, and had always aspired to go back to get my master's in business, and found an international program through the business school called INSEAD. It's a French school, but they have campuses around the world. And so I applied, I got in, 1 year program. I spent most of my year actually living in Singapore and studying there, did a couple of months on the French campus. The culmination of that year, had to make some decisions about where geographically I wanted to be based. And I still didn't feel ready to go back to the US. So I was enjoying this being abroad, traveling a lot, experiencing different cultures. I actually really enjoyed living in Asia, but that was so far from home and from family. I decided I'll follow some of my classmates to Europe and ended up in London, where I spent the next 8.5 years, somewhat accidentally, but got into customer success there, which I'll come back to. Became a British citizen as well while I was there, but really wanted to realize that dream, coming full circle to my studying in Spain experience, and found my way to Southern Europe about 1.5 years ago now, and relocated myself to Lisbon in Portugal, where I now enjoy sunshine 300 days a year, and I'm close to nature and really enjoying the lifestyle here. So that's a bit about my wanderings. How that ties back to being in customer success. I started my career in finance and accounting, actually, and that whole time I was working in the US, I was more on the corporate finance and business operations side of things. And after I got my master's, I said, you know what, I really love the technology space. I had been at DocuSign in their early days of scale, and it was fun, it was fast, building the plane while flying it. I really enjoyed that. But I wanted to get closer to revenue. And I didn't know quite what that meant, but I started talking to different companies in that kind of Series B, Series C space, and got an offer to join a professional services team as a consultant, and said, that's cool. We get to work with customers, get to solve problems. I generate revenue because we're selling our services. I'll try that. And about 6 months after that, started that job at a company called Qubit. It's about a $20 million business. They had no account management, no customer success management. And one of the leaders asked me, would I be open to starting the customer success team? And I said, yes, I think this is missing in this business. I'm ready for the challenge.
Challenge accepted.
Sorry?
Challenge accepted.
Exactly, 100%, enthusiastically. And so I started that team. We grew it to about 15 people across the UK, Spain, Germany, and the US. And about 2.5 years after I started that team and grew it, I got a call from my network back in the US saying, hey, there's this company called Seismic. They're getting ready to start operations in Europe. They need someone to run customer success outside of the US. Would you be interested in speaking to them? I said yes again. And soon thereafter, joined Seismic as their first hire in Europe in customer success. Did a bit of everything with customers, and then grew that team, inherited the Asia Pacific team over the course of my 5.5 years there. We went from basically nothing to about 50 million, and me to about 23 people in customer success. So probably learned more than anything in that role about customer success than I could have imagined. But I think one of the things that's kept me abroad, and is a key part of our conversation today, Byron, is the fact that one of the things I've loved so much about my roles has been needing to navigate cultural differences and work across cultures. I love that challenge. I love the learning that it brings. And yeah, I'm excited to dive into that more.
Laura, we can easily record almost any topic with you about customer success, but we genuinely choose cultural awareness, and I think that is because our experiences as well. And probably you have a lot of more experience in both sides than me, but the challenges that we can all go through as when it comes to moving around the world and talking to different customers from different regions, from different cultures, and then from us as well, like getting integrated into a culture and being part of it is just a whole journey. And that's why I'm really curious to hear from you the challenges that you have gone through your personally when being part of a country, a region, a culture, but also how you have developed skills to that actually you can implement as a customer success manager.
Absolutely. I think I always say that customer success is the business of human management. At the end of the day, as CSMs, as CS leaders, we're building relationships with other people. And so, one of the things I love about this topic and why it's so important that it's part of a customer success focused podcast is that you can't get away from culture in your personal or your professional life because it deals with people and culture is deeply ingrained in each of us. And I think for those of us who have moved around and experienced being the minority, we have a different, maybe a deeper appreciation and feeling about what that's like. And you asked, what are some of the things that I started to feel or started to learn? I never appreciated until I moved abroad how important small talk is, but how very specific to a region or a culture that can be. So when I arrived in the UK and also blindly thinking, well, we speak English, it's not the same language I learned across multiple regions. um, I realized that I didn't have a lot of context for things that I would ordinarily talk about with customers. So, sports, where they grew up in a country, what school or university they went to. In America, these were all things that just rolled right off my tongue. And if someone said I went to such and such university, I grew up here, I vaguely knew what that meant. I knew where that was in the country. I knew what some of the stereotypes of that region were. I might have known people that went there and could immediately start asking, "Oh, when were you there? Maybe you knew this person." If it was about sports, I followed American sports. I knew what they were. And I got to the UK and I don't follow football closely. Don't understand the rules of cricket. I don't know rugby really well. And it took away all of this low-hanging fruit, aside from the weather, which is pretty universal. Was suddenly like, oh, okay, I have to rethink how I build relationships and fill time at the beginning of conversations with colleagues or customers. And I would get a lot of questions. I also realized what stereotypes there are about Americans that I may or may not fulfill, but how quickly people make assumptions. I had a lot of questions sometimes, especially if I was on the phone and people didn't know where I was based. Customers, would immediately ask, "Oh, are you in New York?" And they didn't want me to be there. They wanted me to be local. Or they would intimate that some of my enthusiasm was perhaps not very genuine because there are some stereotypes against Americans being overly enthusiastic. And I had to learn to navigate that and in some cases to change my language or my approach, especially with new people, not to be disingenuous to who I was, but to be a bit more culturally aware and sensitive.
Yeah, for sure. So you had more information that you can use to create more empathy towards those assumptions, right? And then you also said about small talk that for me equals as well rapport. I think that having these conversations, it makes it so easy when you can when you can build rapport when you come and say, oh, I have been there, or oh, so is it true that you're celebrating this? Like having that curiosity of let me learn a little bit more about you. I think it's fantastic. For example, Laura and everyone listening here, right now I'm working with customers from the north side of Europe, Sweden and Norway, and sometimes with customers from Spain. And I can see the difference when it comes to small talk. I can see the difference how the Nordic side, they are more into more direct conversations. They are more high context. They are more direct. They give me the information I need, and I need to give that back. Versus with Spain, is just a different dynamic. It's more open conversation. It's more reading between lines as well. So I think that it gives the opportunity to kind of to also develop a skill of hearing what they're saying and what it means.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. That's really, really well said. And I often say like it's a double-edged sword to have stereotypes because they can lead you astray, but they can also really help with what you're saying, Byron, until you get to know some people, understanding a little more about how they might be or what that culture might be like, so that you can go in a little bit more prepared. And you mentioned the power of empathy and curiosity. And I would say those are like my two key words about cross-cultural collaboration and communication. And when I realized I was quite hamstrung with how to initiate some of the small talk or participate in some of the small talk that was happening around me, my first reaction was to almost panic, like, I don't know these things. And then it's like, well, then ask questions. And actually, when I showed an interest in other people and could admit, this is new to me, I'd really like to learn more. I'm establishing my life here. I understand this is important to you and to this culture. Then the rapport building could happen so much faster because people appreciated that genuine interest. And it was genuine, that interest. They're super happy most of the time, obviously in the right context, to take time to talk you through it and share their passion for something with you. There are times where we might miss something because we didn't know or we forgot,
It
like,
will happen,
oh,
yeah.
I made a call during Ramadan. And in those cases, again, back to we're all human. This is a normal thing that can happen. Just being sensitive, apologizing, admitting that, oh, I forgot or I didn't realize, and making sure that the other person, whether that's a colleague or a customer, knows that they've been heard. And again, back to the empathy piece, that you can understand that might have not felt great to them is the only thing we can do in those situations.
Indeed. And you also mentioned colleagues. So we keep focusing on customers, right? Of course, they're the center. Because of them, we are here and so on. And there's a lot of things that in a lot of blogs, communities, podcasts, events, we all talk about best practices, and there are just too many best practices to apply in one day. We're going to make mistakes. But one aspect of this side is also our colleagues and working in an international environment where colleagues are coming from different part of the world. How have you dealt with this? Because I'm pretty sure you can give us the lens of an individual collaborator, but also as a leader.
Yes.
There's two different layers here.
There are a couple of layers there. And maybe I'll start with the leader piece because a couple of big examples come to mind. And I think the first is how I underestimated before leaving America the difference. And you've mentioned this a little bit too, Byron, your observations, the difference in mindset around hierarchy in different cultures. And I guess this also extends to the customer relationships, but in particular, me as a leader, my approach is always I'm open, I'm accessible. I don't see myself as any different than anyone else in the team. It's just that I need to keep everyone organized and marching in the same direction by nature of my job, but I'm there with you. And because I had the title of the leader of the team, not everyone in the team treated me like I was just open or the same as them. And that was hard for me. And there were times I noticed, particularly in the Southern European cultures, where hierarchy was more important. And so until, someone had spoken to the next person in line, if I was maybe two steps up, or until they felt they had their story straight, they weren't going to come talk to me and just brainstorm or something. And that I actually took offense to that for a while, like, oh, I'm not being open enough, or they don't feel comfortable with me. I've done something to make them uncomfortable, when in fact, this is just how that culture was. And so I had to learn that and either learn to respect it or learn to acknowledge it in advance and say, I know that often and I choose my words carefully. And right now, I'm not going to say them kind of right off the top of my head, so to
Oops.
speak. But I would maybe just approach it from the get go of, I know it's not always common necessarily in your work culture, or maybe in past companies that you've been in, that it's okay to just come straight to the boss to let levels up. But I love to work that way, and if you're open to it, I'm very open to you doing that, and just acknowledging and working with that. I think in terms of, well, kind of staying on that theme with customers as well, being cognizant of how hierarchies are viewed across cultures has been important to know who we need to put in the room with customers as well. So there are certain meetings, for example, in the UK, where I know I have a really strong senior CSM in my team. It's a big meeting, there's a senior stakeholder, but I need to be in a different call and I'm fine. That meeting will be fine. My CSM can handle that. They don't need support. And the senior stakeholder on the customer side will respect that CSM. We're good. In some other cultures where hierarchy is more important, I've had to make sure I'm there because title, it's like a sign of respect that we're matching like for like, title for title. And I hadn't experienced that. I also wasn't in this exact same position in America, but that was not something that I had experienced previously until kind of getting into some of these more recent CS leadership roles in Europe. I think then the other place from a colleague perspective that
I will,
really stands,
I
sorry,
will just interrupt just
please.
really, really quick because there is so much to dig in here. Like just by there are two layers, right? The or two perspective, the individual collaborator and also the leader. So if we stick with the leader, you touch on something super interesting, which is hierarchy, and I it's definitely part of being adaptability, right? I think that's a skill that one learns as well when it comes to moving around is adaptability. And you said hierarchy, and this reminds me when I moved to Germany for the first time. Here, hierarchy it's it's important, but not as important as in Costa Rica, but it's less important as in the Netherlands, where I am now working. So it's about like I moved from a place where hierarchy is important to another one where it is, but not as much. I was constantly kind of waiting for people to tell me what to do. It's like, okay, and so tell me, right? And then on the other side, it's like, okay, should I do this or should I just go directly into my manager and ask for approval before I do it? No,
Mm.
just go ahead and try and mess up. And now, in working in a company in the Netherlands, is that hierarchy is just it's just not there. Like leadership is there and it's supportive, but if you have an idea and you can share it with the team, you just go for it versus once I was working with a company from New York where hierarchy is also more important. So it's just that as an individual collaborator, when you see it from bottom up, it's also something to pay attention to. So that way you
Yes.
can kind of know how, where, and at what time you can bring an idea or how not to disrespect someone. So it's just a, I just wanted to highlight basically from my perspective what you said about the hierarchy side.
It's such a good point. And I think it's nuanced too, because it's not just country culture, it is company culture as well. And
Mm,
so
yeah,
often, a company based somewhere will reflect a little bit more broadly its local country culture, but not always. And so um, it is important when you're new somewhere to A, be observing this, but B, as I said, as a leader, I'll often be quite upfront with folks about this tends to be how I work. But I think as an individual contributor, you don't necessarily have to wait and observe. It's totally acceptable to speak to your manager and to your peers a little bit very soon after you begin somewhere to
love this.
understand what the norms of those cultures are, because you're kind
Mm.
of doing yourself a disservice if you don't get a flavor for that sooner than later.
That's so powerful, Laura. That's so powerful what you're saying. You're giving a before someone when someone is going through this, it's like Laura just gave you one way for you to solve this, and it's basically asking around how you can how everything works.
Definitely. And I'm of a strong opinion that that's a lot of what people managers owe their teams. We need to be open and honest about the best ways to work. And so if I have someone new in my team, we better make that clear right away, because I have the responsibility as the leader to set them up for success. And how you go about getting things done is pretty much like going to determine your success in the role. And then ultimately, for those of us in CS, our customers' success as well.
But Laura, isn't this too much energy draining?
For a leader,
Yeah.
interesting question. I hadn't thought about it. I, well, I suppose it could depend how big your team is or how many new people you have. But I guess for me, it's just so ingrained in what good leadership is that you can tell I'm like, I don't think that's too draining. I think it's a critical tenet of helping other people be successful, which ultimately is the role of a leader. Maybe less so a manager, if we want to get into the manager versus leader topic. Maybe not today, but definitely a good leader is there to bring out the strengths of the people in the team and make sure that they're set up for success.
Yeah, yeah, like planting the sea of curiosity kind of deal, so that we can all understand each other. Because I think that also when it comes to cultural awareness and moving around and these challenges, it's also about that you improve your communications towards that colleague or that culture inside of your company, because it also comes around feedback, right? We are still in the lens of a leader. We haven't moved to the individual collaborator. We will do soon, but if we stick here, feedback is also something
Mm.
that is given so different depending on so many things, right? Like company culture, but also country culture wise. And yeah, what do you think about this? Because I'm really curious to hear how you have given or received feedback by working in other companies.
That's a really good question. And I would say this is actually a topic in which I start to try to even get down to the individual level. So let's throw aside culture almost and start to understand how does each person communicate and in particular receive communication and listen and hear. Feedback's highly personal, and even within a single country culture, different personalities are going to want and need that feedback in different ways. So, for example, I've had folks in the team, I tend to be, because being vulnerable, giving constructive feedback for me can be hard. And so I've tended to take more the approach of making suggestions, but I rarely will say that was poorly done. It needs to be XYZ in the future, for example. And I've actually had team members say to me, "You're too nice. I need black and white feedback. I'm not hearing the constructive criticism that you're giving because it's said too nicely."
Yeah, yeah, that's what you're probably like communicating with downgraders words, right? Like,
A bit
I
some
think you should might stop doing this. Is the
sometimes. Or,
other-
hey, next time I'd really like to see you build on that by doing these things. And honestly, most of the time I'm being serious. I didn't necessarily think it was bad, but if you want to get to the next level or take the customer to the next level, these are the next things that you need to demonstrate to me and to the customer. Interestingly, I can say the same thing to two different people and they'll respond differently. And I've kind of done that where I've given similar feedback and one person will say, "It's black and white. I don't think I get what underlying competency you're getting at." And I'll have someone else take that feedback and be like, "Yeah, you're right. And you know what? I think I kind of missed this or that, or yep, that competency that you're hinting at, that's something we've talked about before. I need to work on." And they can like take it and go. So, um, trying to bring this to a close, I'll just reiterate that communication in general, but particularly delivering what could be received as difficult messages by someone, really should be a tailored experience. And you can use your cultural knowledge to influence that. But it's really important to understand each individual person. And I think that's true as a leader giving feedback to someone in the team, as well as a CSM talking to a customer, talking through a difficult situation with a customer.
Ooh, that's so true, right? Like having difficult conversations with a customer, or how to say no to a customer, keeping in mind their cultural background, that it could definitely affect. Like if you can easily have miscommunications based on the words that you're using. if you're giving feedback or saying no to a customer who is maybe in Asia versus one that is in the Netherlands or in Germany, it's different than if we go to the States or in Costa Rica, right? Like I heard from Erin Myers, who wrote the book The Culture Map, that for example in the States, for you to give negative feedback, normally you give three positive feedbacks and then you give the negative one, right? And in Costa Rica, what happens is that we are low context. So it's like we need to read between lines what people are saying. And it's like, okay, so did I messed up or did I not? I don't get you. Versus and in the Netherlands, it's like as what I felt, and also in Germany, it's more like, yeah, so you're doing a great job, but that's already done. You're doing a great job. It's not. Let's not focus on that. Let's focus on what you need to change. And at the beginning, I was like, "Oh my god, why are you treating me like that?"
Totally. It's very, you feel very affronted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's so tough at the beginning,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah,
doesn't.
I found that working with Dutch customers, especially, there are times when they're just so direct with me and I'm like, whoa. And I think, oh, now they're upset because that's my own cultural thing coming in. Like they really
Yeah,
laid it down. They must be mad. And 2 seconds later, we're just having a joke and it's all fine. Like, no, that is the way that they communicate and that is their culture. And I'm absorbing that as an American slash kind of British now as well. And
flash
that's hard,
Spanish and flash
but
Portuguese.
I'm just going to take it.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's easier for them to differentiate between feedback or a discussion, and then okay, we are friends. Let's continue having fun time.
Yes.
What about the individual collaborator point of view when it comes to a company, right? Because now, yeah, we touch a little bit on customer relationship, but now we're focusing internally within us. So, what has been your experience of why is it important for us to have this cultural awareness with our same colleagues?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm a big believer that our teams need to be collaborative to be successful, and we want to see the best in everyone else and the best of what they're doing, particularly in customer success. We often all work with our customers with our slightly different flavor, and that's great. How can we adapt those things? And so a lot of what I've talked about learning how to communicate well across everyone in an organization, whether that's the customers or your own, is critical. And I think, I think about my team at Seismic, where we had folks in Australia, Germany, France, the UK, and the way everyone was working with their customers might have been different because of culture. It might have been different because of the size of customer or the industry in which they worked. When we could come back together and share, oh, this worked really well with this customer, we would then sometimes have the deeper conversation. And I expected the CSMs to be doing this even without management facilitation on, okay, well, let's ask about why that worked well. What was the customer's response? What might have driven that response? So starting to go a little bit deeper, because yeah, I would have some CSMs in France say, that's great that that worked in Australia, but a French customer would never accept it that way. Or I'm going to need to take them to lunch and warm them up to that idea before I just like, woo, here it is in a presentation on a Zoom at some point, for example. So understanding the context in which your colleagues are working mean that you can adapt stuff that you're learning from them more effectively, I think, to your own role. And then just in general, like we were saying with communication and relationship building, especially if you're in a heavy team culture in your company, it's that listening, that empathy, that curiosity about people that mean you'll build stronger bonds and ultimately probably just have a nicer time at work in general. These are the people that you need to spend time with most days. So might as well make the most of it, make it enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, you are almost 8 hours if you're lucky. If 8 hours times 5 times 4, and let's stop counting because it's depressing. But yeah, like why not use that as a way to just make everyone else feel better, and also for them to make you feel better, kind of understand that part of you. If you have a different culture, um, we all have culture, right? So I mean, and culture is also within country, like in the
Yes,
states.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, in Germany as well, Byron, I hear all of the tales of Bavaria versus the North. And yeah,
Indeed.
certainly within the US, like I mentioned at the start of the podcast that I come from the middle of the country. And as soon as I say that, people automatically have thoughts about what that means, that I'm probably more conservative, or at least that I grew up in a conservative environment, that really nice, that there's hospitality, that there are strong values, versus I grew up on one of the coasts, or I grew up in New York City. Okay, you're probably like a real go-getter, and you're strong and you're direct. Um, so those, again, back to stereotypes. Not everyone fulfills the stereotypes of where they are from, but um, we do automatically start to put people in boxes or ascribe certain traits to them based on the information that we have about their uh, upbringing, their life experiences, where they're from.
And that's why I wanted to touch this part as well, Laura, because if there's someone who's listening here and says, my customers are just from my same country, why do I care about their cultural awareness or listening to you and Laura talk about this? I mean, it's good to have. The thing is that culture is also within a country. So, like understanding where the person is coming from and what motivates them, or what do you have in common, or all of the details that you can grab from someone who's living in California, from someone in New York, from someone in Berlin, from someone from Bavaria, and same in Costa Rica, from the Pacific to the Caribbean side. It's always good to have this in mind to build that relationship with your customer, but also make everyone within your company feel nice. And because what you're saying here is assumptions, stereotypes, right? So I mean, if
Often.
everyone knows that I'm Latino, they're gonna say, "Oh, okay, so you always late." In my case, it's true.
Except today, I'll tell the whole audience I was late and Byron was on time. So,
I'm starting to be German now. I'm Germanized now.
but I
Because
think I want to go back to that point around culture, even if
yeah,
you're managing customers all in the same
yeah.
country, or even within the same region of the same country. Back to the point we made earlier, company culture still plays a role. And that is a very important facet of culture in our jobs as customer success managers. And so much of our goal in the CS world is to figure out how to build better relationships, to extract more value, or give more value, create mutual value, shall we say, with our customers. And of course, we're all under financial pressures to maintain and grow the commercial footprint that we have with customers. And understanding the culture of the company, how they work, how they make decisions, how they get things done, how they're going to speak about you internally, are so critical to our success as partners to those customers, that yes, okay, culture plays a role, but for all of us, company culture plays a huge role. And a lot of these skills and things that we're discussing about country culture apply on the micro scale of company and those relationships too.
So you're saying more into the company culture itself.
Mhm.
When it comes to feedback, when it comes to communication, it's not only about the cultural background that we have, it's also the culture as a company, the values.
Yes, and within our customers' companies, how do they make decisions, for example? In some companies, that's going to be very process driven, extremely hierarchical. To get a renewal signed, it doesn't matter how good of a relationship you have with the director you work with, it's going to have to go all the way to the CEO. And in other companies, middle management may be very empowered to a certain point to make loads of decisions for their teams, for example. And gathering that kind of information is important to us being able to influence effectively within our customers' organizations.
Influence efficiency effectively within our customers organization. We influence effectively because we have to be effective to influence as well within our customers organization, so we're partnering with our customers. Love that, Laura. This is amazing. You're great. It's time to start wrapping up today's episode. And before we start wrapping up today's episode, I literally just said the same thing twice. What the fuck? What I want to say is that I have one more question for you, Laura. Are you ready?
I think so. Let's see what you've got. Can I answer that after you ask the question?
This part will not be edited. Traveling the world, working with different customers, different colleagues, going through outside of your comfort zone more than once, probably you messed up more than once as well. So, can you give us some examples of when did you messed up, and how did you fucked up? Like, how did you fucked up, basically? But we
Okay.
don't make those mistakes.
This is a good one. I'm sure that there are so many examples that I'm not going to think of right now, or I've become so used to doing things that turn heads that I'm now
Or you just don't want to
desensitized to
share.
it. But I think one of the stories that I'll tell um, is about, within the first 6 months or so, I was in the UK. And in London, going to the pub after work is a thing. And this was pre COVID. So we were all in the office every day. And if not once, at least once, if not twice a week, we'd all go to the pub after work. For me in America, doing that, people have one, maybe two drinks, they go home, all good. In the UK, there is a concept of buying rounds. So if you go to the pub with 5 people, it goes around who buys the next round of drinks. And most of the time, people stay for everyone to buy a round. So when
Wow.
I would go to the pub, and I'm not a massive drinker, when I go to the pub, maybe I have one, maybe if there's a Friday, I have a second beer. And often I would offer to pay on the first round, and people would say, no, you can get the next one. And it wouldn't become my turn, and I would leave. And after a couple of months of this, someone in my team actually had to tell me that it was starting to look quite rude that I never paid for a round. So because I would just leave, and I didn't realize
Oh,
that
that must be
this
so
was like
uncomfortable.
noticed in the culture.
Yeah.
But it was, and I was not trying to be cheap and get my drinks paid for. I just didn't understand, and they knew that, so it became something that we could kind of joke about. But that really stuck with me because I was very sensitive to like, oh, it looks like I'm just trying to leave before it's my turn, and I just don't want another drink. So sometimes I would stay and I would get water for myself and buy the round for everyone else just to keep up with the cultural norm.
Oh my God, that must be a little bit embarrassing, right?
It is embarrassing.
And do you have any mistake with customers?
I don't think that specifically never happened with a customer. Have I made any? I'm sure I have. I'm trying to think.
It's just so hard always to be aware of everything, right?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the challenge is sometimes you won't be, and they need to tell you or call you out on it. I think I've certainly had good jokes with customers. I remember in particular, I worked with a very large Dutch company for a number of years and had a fantastic relationship with them. And we would often joke with each other about how direct and indirect people were on either side. We had a very cross-cultural team, all partnering on this project, but I don't think there were any times where we really felt like, oh, that was a big miss. So I don't think I have any good customer stories to share off the top of my head. If I think of any, we can add them to the comments on the podcast or something in
Yeah,
writing.
absolutely. Or if anyone is curious, just comment on the episode as well, and we can always answer your questions. But Laura, you are in Portugal right now, so obrigado for your time.
Mucho obrigada,
And
Byron.
it has been super. It's have been great to talk to you, to talk about cultural awareness, and at least based on our lens, right, on our experience. And hopefully, this episode has helped everyone else to also raise curiosity how into our customers, into how we can continue that relationship building with our customers, but then also how we can grow with our colleagues and how we can grow independently within the company to bring more ideas to the table and how to present them, right? So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Love the conversation. And if anyone wants to discuss this further, they can absolutely feel free to connect with me. Obviously, I like the topic, as you can tell from my big smile.
I think we can plan something in the future to talk about more about this and bring more awareness out there. But everyone, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your support. If you got into this 45 minutes of episode, that means that you like it. And I have been receiving a lot of love from all of you. So I really appreciate that. There's a lot more coming. And I just like to say thank you very much. And remember, keep learning, keep growing, and let's keep improving the world of customer success. Until next time.